Now we're going to work on getting one product by ID. So in the corresponding method, let's use the using statement using var_db new products context as we did before. And we're going to store the product in a variable. And to get the product, we're going to access the products DB set, calling the single or default method, passing the ID of the product. And we use this method because there will be just one matching element, hence the single, and we don't want the application to throw an error if there are no records, hence the default. So if there are no records, what will be returned is null, which is the default value for custom types. Now, since we're passing the ID to the single or default method, we're going to change the signature of the getProductById method. So this method will return a product and we'll have an integer ID as a parameter, and it will return the product that it got from the database. So again, very straightforward. Entity Framework makes it very easy to get one record from the database, but getting that input from the user will be slightly more complicated. So we're going to add an extra layer for this application, which is the products service. We want to keep our controller very lean with the only purpose of connecting to the database. So any processing of data will be done in this service layer. So let's create the product service. And we're going to create a method that will be responsible for presenting the options to the users and collecting the input. So we want this method to be available at all times without needing to instantiate the product service, and the name will be getProductOptionInput. Then we'll get a list of all products, calling the product controller.getProducts, and we will grab all the names of the products using the select method on the products list and calling the toArray method. So essentially from the products list, I'm just selecting the names of the products, which is an expression made incredibly easy by LINQ and any framework working together. And once I have that array, I can create the options for the user. So as we did in the main menu, let's call the nzconsole.prompt, passing a new selection prompt. And we will create a title as well and add some choices, and the choices will be the array of product names. Now the users will pick the product by the name, but I'm gonna pick the products by the ID. So I need to be able to find that ID based on the name. So to do that, I need to use the single method again. And this time I'm using single instead of single or default, because we know for sure that that name will always exist since it was grabbed earlier in this method. And to access the ID, I'm just adding the .id after the parentheses. So now that I have the ID, I can finally call the getProductById in the controller and return the product, since this method has as a return type the product. So I'm creating 5 variables here, and I could optimize this code and use less variables and less steps, but I just wanted it to be very clear and simple since this is a beginner tutorial. Now we finally have to go to the menu, and in the view product option, we're going to store the product in a variable, calling the getProductOptionInput in the product service. Then I need to create another method in the user interface to show a product, since at the moment that class only has a showProducts method. So if I invoke a method that doesn't exist, I can generate that method using Visual Studio, and that's what I'm doing here. And once the method is created, let's see what it's going to contain. I'm going to use another component of Spectre Console, and that's going to be the panel. So I'm storing an instance of the panel class, which comes from Spectre Console in this panel variable. And then I need to pass the string with the contents of the panel. And I need to add product as a parameter in the method's signature. And I'm going to use string interpolation and verbatim string with the $ and the @ signs so that I can have each property in a different line. I'm also going to have a header for this panel, and I need to instantiate a panel header object, passing a string, which will be product info, and I'm also adding some padding for formatting. Then I will render that panel using nconsole.write, passing the panel. And again, I'm going to wait for the user to enter a key before going back to the main menu, and I will also clear the console. Back in the menu, I can't forget to pass the product to the showProduct method in the user interface, and that should be it. Let's test it. And I can select the product using the arrows in the keyboard. And once I choose a product, I can see the panel with the ID and the name. Very simple so far, but effective. Since I said that I want to keep it very lean, I'm going to remove this nconsole.ask from the addProduct method. And this method will now expect a string. And now the name input will be collected somewhere else. And that's going to be in the main menu. And of course, we need to pass the name into the method. And that's it. Now our controller has one responsibility, which is to connect to the database. There's no input being taken inside the controller. Next, let's see how we will delete a record from the database.